Welcome to another episode of Southern Arizona's Nonprofits, the superheroes impacting our community. We are broadcasting live today on the Tucson Business Channel, a division of Mark Bishop Media, from the Stewart Title corporate offices on Broadway in Tucson, Arizona. We're brought to you today by SCIP, SSCIP, the social services contractor indemnity pool that has been insuring nonprofits like ours for nearly 4 decades now. I'm Barbara McClure, Executive Director of Impact of Southern Arizona, host of the show, and with me today are 2 gentlemen from one organization that provides economic access and opportunities to people in Southern Arizona. Their support makes dreams come true. Please join me in welcoming Danny Nee, Executive Director of Community Investment Corporation, and for short we call it CIC Tucson. Hi,
That's
Danny.
right. We know each other well enough to, use the shortened name. So
Otherwise it's so long, isn't it? But CIC for easy. And then also with us today are Scott Evans. He's the Director of Family and School Engagement in a new program called My Schools Tucson. Hi, Scott.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. So we're going to talk about this amazing organization and what it does for our community. And so I thought I'd start with you, Danny, and you could tell us when it started and how it got started.
So CIC has actually been around since 1996. We were originally started by the Pima Industrial Development Authority. So it's a subdivision of Pima County, and basically their work is economic development, and we were created as a support organization for them to basically to be a nonprofit that also supports what their goals are, and that is basically economic development in Pima County and the connected region of Southern Arizona.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't even realize it had come out of that, or that it had been around so long.
It's been around for a long time doing, and we work on a number of different areas of access to the economy. The idea really is that our economy works great for a lot of people. And what we want to make sure is that everybody has full access to the tools and the benefits of a working economy. And so we do that through 3 program areas. We do it through home ownership. We do it through education, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And we also do it through entrepreneurship and access to capital for those who may not be able to get loans from traditional banks, from businesses that can't get those loans.
That's an exciting topic, especially for us. My husband and I were entrepreneurs for about 25, 30 years before I got into nonprofits when we moved here to Tucson. And so we were in manufacturing and all different kinds of things, new innovative technologies for ICE movement. And so I personally really embrace that whole idea of entrepreneurism. And we have clients at Impact who, through our job skills program, want to start their own businesses. And, I'm all for that. So we have some funding set aside for that, as long as they come up with a business plan and have it all put together. So when I saw that you were doing that, this spring, I thought, oh, how wonderful that exists for people. So I'd love to hear a little more about that one too.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we see is that people have the entrepreneurial drive and spirit, as you said, and a lot of us will talk about the American dream, and part of that is to be able to sort of make your own way, and to own a business, start a business, own a business, and what we found is, and this is where nonprofits often work, is in those spaces where there are gaps, and traditionally, unfortunately, banks rely really heavily on existing wealth. So assets, if you think of easiest, even though it's not business, is a home, basically a home mortgage. The house itself is what's securing that mortgage. If you weren't to pay it off, then the bank can take back the house. And banks work that way with businesses too. And so they often are securing other assets as sort of a guarantee of payment. And the issue with that, and the issue isn't, I'm not here to demonize banks. It works really well in lots of parts of the economy. But the problem is that means that only people with existing wealth have access to those tools to create more wealth through entrepreneurship, or certainly to do it more easily. And so what we're doing is looking at different ways to lend, which don't rely on existing wealth, so uncollateralized loans. And then we also think that credit scores, while useful in a lot of ways, they are also a bit reductive. They sort of, you reduce somebody's entire kind of history down to a number. And the reality is we've had a lot of success with what's called trust-based or character-based lending, which is to look beyond what somebody's past has been, and to really invest in their future more about, their idea that they have and maybe how well they've been doing even just at a small scale. And oftentimes they need a little bit of capital, of money, to be able to make a better go of it. And so that's, we focus on that area. And what we have seen, and because of persistent gaps in wealth that have correlations with race, is that individuals, BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous people of color, have really had less opportunity. They've been disadvantaged by a system that starts by looking at your wealth, by looking at what assets you have. And so we actually have a 0% microloan fund for entrepreneurs of color that we started a few years ago that's been really, honestly, pretty successful. It uses no financial underwriting on the front end. People probably think that sounds crazy. I'm sure a few bankers just passed out if they're listening. But what we do is we have them tell a story, and then their application is actually evaluated. Their story is evaluated by a committee, and it's all people of color. I am not. I'm a white male, and sometimes I joke that it's guys like me who have created the system. And so what we need to have other people looking to evaluate what those loan applications look like. We've done 44 loans so far, and 43 of them are performing. We have one that is in a little bit of trouble and may default, but that's all without doing financial underwriting on the front end. We do it on the back end, and to let people know, like, hey, there may be some issues and there may be some problems here, and here's what you need to look at and be careful about. But they can still take that $10,000 loan at 0% interest.
That's great. And then do they have a long time to pay it back?
It's usually 3 to 5 years. Most of the terms are 5 years, but we just look at what they can afford in monthly payments, depending on the size of the business. And we work with really small businesses. We've done evaluations of our portfolio, and the average size loan, average business is generating about $80,000 in terms of gross revenue annually. So these are, they're sometimes solopreneurs, a single person, or even a side hustle that people are trying to make a go of it. And I think that's where a lot of businesses actually start these days, is as people talk about somebody's side hustle, and then they make it into a full-time business.
I think especially after COVID, that's become such a thing.
Absolutely. So many people had to sort of pivot and shift and find something different. And you probably know this as an entrepreneur. I mean, it's definitely not easy, but at the same time, you have more control in some ways over your employment. And that, I think, is also something we saw during COVID when layoffs had to happen. People want to rely on themselves. My wife owns her own web development company. She started about 8 years ago. And that was one of the major reasons, was just having more control over your own destiny in some ways.
Sure. And I think sometimes timing. My husband and I, we had 3 boys at the time. And so if we needed to, I could come back and do the bookkeeping at 11 o'clock at night, or after they went to bed, or whenever it fit our family schedule. So It did have a lot of flexibility.
And that's needed, especially with the populations that we're often dealing with, which we say under-resourced, and that can be financially, or the other big part, and Scott will talk about this, is also time. People, like if you're a single mom, or if you have 2 working parents, there isn't lots of extra time to do some of the things that you need, just the basics in life. And so that idea of having some more flexibility, being able to sort of steal some time from somewhere I think is an important factor.
You're right. I think it's not a resource that people think of people being who are underserved or under-resourced. They don't think of time as a resource. But I can tell you that even at the impact clients, even just people who are struggling to make ends meet, or they're juggling so many balls, it's just that they don't even have time to think beyond, how am I going to feed my children this weekend? So anything outside that becomes really challenging. So their time is full of all kinds of things many people don't have to fill it with.
Right. And I think that's something, and it gets talked about, and people have different perspectives on it, but there is a time tax to being poor. And I don't think that people always think about that, in terms of what it takes to get your basic needs met. There are wonderful programs all over, the city. I've been in nonprofit for close to 25 years. And at the same time, when I say that, anytime somebody's accessing help, it takes time to do so. It's not something that is just easily done, and it's not Amazon. We haven't figured out the Amazon of nonprofit service where it just gets delivered to your doorstep in 1 or 2 days. When we figure that out, huh? Yeah, we'll be then you and I will have made it at that point.
There you go. And all our clients will be so easily served.
That's right.
That is fun. I think it's just an interesting thing, even in terms of that daily living. So many of our clients who are, their main resource gap is transportation. And so we are way out in Catalina, which everybody tells us it's way out there when they come to drive out. But the thing is, if you have to catch a bus if you have an appointment in downtown Tucson and you are in Catalina, you have to get the shuttle bus, which comes every half an hour, to Oro Valley, and then get a transfer, and you have to get down. So if you have a 9 a.m. appointment, just the time it takes to get there for somebody who doesn't have a vehicle and has to take a bus is like 3 times what it takes me to drive down. So, another example of time lost in a day.
Absolutely. And I think what we work on again is access to the economy. And so those things are important. That extra time it takes to do things. And, obviously I think all of us work towards hoping we can help people become self-sufficient and have all the things that they need. But sometimes they need a little bit of help to do that. And, fortunately, we live in a very generous community who I think sees that and, donates to a lot of worthy causes. And I think in general really cares about their other community members, their neighbors.
Sure. And I think at Impact, we often say that access to one resource can start a ripple of change in someone's life. And something like that, a free loan to get your own personal business started, that would definitely be one of those main ripple starters.
We've seen some amazing stories. There's Katrina Calderon. She's the CEO of Regal Fierce Media. And she was doing some marketing and content creation for social media on the side. She was working at Youth on Their Own, so another nonprofit, doing some marketing. And we gave her a $10,000 0% loan, and she went to Best Buy and bought some better equipment that she needed so that she could take on bigger jobs. And in 18 months, she saw a 600% increase in her gross revenues. She went from making $35,000 a year on a side hustle to making over $200,000 a year, and has hired 2 employees. And those are while that may not be every story, there are more of those stories than people think. And all it took was somebody believing in her and not holding her to the bank standards. Everybody we lend to is considered unbankable. I put that in like air quotes because banks, their applications, whatever they see on them, makes it so that a bank won't give them a loan. They don't like the risk involved. Again, a lot of reliance on credit and looking at the past. We gave her a $10,000 loan, and here she is with an incredibly successful business, just won an award from the Better Business Bureau. And I think that's what we're trying to invest in. We're investing in people to be able to take just that little bit of help and do amazing things with it.
Well, that's a pretty exciting resource to have here in Tucson. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And then I know I was talking to Scott not too long ago because we at Impact are giving away over 300 backpacks stuffed with school supplies starting here at the end of the month. And so our clients come in and pick up this backpack. And your new program at CIC, which is My Schools Tucson, is a very neat project. So Scott, if you're managing that, we thought maybe you could give us a quick overview of what that is. And I know you've done this big survey and you've collected all kinds of data. So maybe you can tell us what you've learned.
Sure, yeah. So My Schools Tucson essentially is a resource for the Tucson community in Pima County for parents and families that are looking to find schools, explore schools, and really engage with their schools. So what it is it's we've launched a website, and it's a school locator, which would help families see all their school options, find performance data on those schools, quick links so they can access enrollment information from those schools, essentially save them time in that searching process and make sure they understand what all of their options are. So that's one component of My Schools Tucson. The other piece are resources for families to better help them navigate and understand the educational landscape in Arizona. So questions to ask on a school tour might be something a parent could find there. How to navigate the special education landscape. Knowledge about how schools operate, how the enrollment process, deadlines and timelines. A lot of times that's a mystery to parents. When do I apply to this school versus that school? So we really wanted just to bring information to the fingertips of parents. And as Danny was saying, information's out there, but sometimes it's really difficult to access, whether they're time constraints, they're time taxed or under-resourced families, or they don't have the confidence or the skill or the knowledge to even know where to begin. So we really wanted to make the educational landscape and all the information that lies there more accessible, easier to understand, and a process that families are confident and can engage in.
That's so handy because, I think people don't know what resources are out there, so they don't know what they're missing. They don't even know where, like you're saying, that there are deadlines or that the deadlines are so much sooner than they expect them to be. We just had someone who was signing their children up for summer school, and they were surprised to find by the time they went to sign up, it was already full. They just had no idea that it started so soon.
Yeah, and so, that's common with admissions and enrollment.
Oh, I bet.
Some people just assume it's a district school, I can apply whenever I want, or I live close to that school, I can apply and be admitted. But there are it doesn't always work that way, and if you start late and you don't get into the game until late in the day, then you're going to miss some of those opportunities. So,
and you hate to miss a whole school year.
Oh yeah,
really.
No.
Especially young kids or who really need that kickstart or, extra support if they need to switch schools for a different kind of programming.
Yeah. Well, and we did, before we sort of really started to go down this road, we did some work in the area to try to listen to parents and what parents' needs were and what sort of where the gaps existed. And so we held focus groups in Pima County to better understand that. And then we had a survey that we sent out last fall, over a 1,100 parent survey, Arizona parents, to kind of really understand where the pain points were and what the needs of families are in this community. And mostly what we found were some real disparities in race and income levels as to how those families were able to navigate the system, what their knowledge of the educational system was like. We found low-income families knew far less about open enrollment in the district schools, far less about vouchers and tax credits for private schools, far less about the accountability state letter grades that are assigned to schools. So there's just a huge disparity that we felt like, this needs to be fixed, and we wanted to try to do what we could to sort of bridge that gap.
That's exciting. I know we're going to put, Scott brought some flyers and some cards, so we're going to put them in all our backpacks. So all of the kids up in the rural community that we serve, we serve the Copper Corridor as well as Pima, but I imagine these are mostly Pima resources.
Pima resources, yeah.
Sure.
We're starting local. We want to, we think that's the way to do it. Start with what we know. We know there is some interest in a resource like this other places, but we're gonna start where we know people and can try to make a go of it. I think as Scott's talking about some of the disparities, there's this debate that goes on around like school choice, and I hate to. I'm probably being a little cavalier about it. We're not that interested in that debate.
Sure.
We don't think it's that productive, quite honestly. There's very vested interests on both sides, and we are really focused on parents and what parents are saying. Our surveys, we're directly with parents. We are also working with schools. We worked with Sunnyside School District to help them do some parent surveys as well. And maybe to bridge that divide between schools and parents, like how they're communicating, what they're providing. But we do think the disparities that we found. We had a University of Arizona professor help us. Somebody who is an expert in statistics, Mark Clark, and to make sure that we were doing this the right way. But there are statistically significant differences, especially, as Scott said, around race and income. Higher income parents are engaging with information in a different way and engaging with schools in a different way than lower income parents. And we think it's really important if there are options out there, everybody should have access to the information about that. We're big fans of neighborhood schools. Both Scott and I, we actually went to school together in Northern California a long time ago. And we are both, public school, grew up and went to public school, loved our traditional public schools. And that's where we come from. But we just think if there is information, we need to be able to get it into the hands of everybody, that idea of you can't have equal opportunity if you don't have basically equal access to information. And so we are trying to bridge that gap a little bit.
That is neat. And, even for us, it's an interesting thing that people don't think about. But in this day and age where it takes two incomes to run a household quite often, in the Copper Corridor of Pinellas County, there are no markets for 100 miles. Their markets are the Circle K or the Dollar General, so there's not a lot of produce. And there's not really a lot of job opportunity. So a lot of those parents actually drive to downtown Tucson to work. They're there all day. So many of them are looking for schools in Tucson because they're just going to go in the morning, drop their child off, and then pick them up or have them in an after-school program and take them home again. So we often get questions from parents, even in Pinellas County, who are looking for Tucson schools downtown. And we, because we're up there, don't have a lot of information. So this will be a great resource for them.
And that's part of the, not just performance metrics that about the schools, there are things about the extracurricular activities, information that parents also need to know about, is there childcare, depending on the age of your child, like that, on site versus somewhere else. Those are really important questions for people, especially families like you just described, who, they may be driving from somewhere else and having their child enrolled, and they have to be able to stay there until the parent is off of work. And so what is available for a child at that point? So we're trying to really get objective information. We're not taking a side in any way, shape, or form in the school choice debate. But we just want to make sure that parents have what they have asked for. And we know that they've asked for it because we surveyed them and what they need. And we have a sense of their needs, again, because we went out and did the work ahead of time, which I think you probably appreciate working in nonprofit. I always joke that we're great at hypothesis in general, and we build something and try to implement it. it was important to us to yes, we thought there was a problem, but we had to go and do the work ahead of time to validate that, and it did come out in the survey. Again, 1,100 randomly sampled parents it's not nothing. That's a pretty good.
That's a good number.
Yeah,
Sure.
for our survey.
To get that many responses turned back. So obviously the parents thought it was valuable because they took the time to do the survey. That's another challenge. Just finding enough participants to return a survey is sometimes a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So my experience we have 2 parents who care about education and care about finding a school, and we found it extremely difficult to sort of know where to start and explore what options might be there. And so if it's hard for us, I can only imagine single parent trying to raise 3 children, or those who just have less time and less resources. So there certainly is, parents deserve better. And it's not that there are people that aren't doing their job. It's just the educational landscape has changed so dramatically in the last 20 years. I think the older generation that grew up with a certain model of education, it doesn't look like that anymore. And it can be a little bit complicated to navigate that with charter schools, district magnet schools, open enrollment. A lot of people don't know that they can open enroll their child in any district school, and it can be in district, out of boundary, anywhere in the state of Arizona. Public school kids can apply to any public school. So
that'd be a fun thing to learn more about if you have some more information to share. I think we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Today's program is brought to you by SKIP, the Social Service Contractors Indemnity Pool. SKIP is a member-owned, member-directed insurance provider with more than 3 decades of insuring Arizona social service organizations for their property, general and professional liability, and auto claim exposures. With an Arizona-based staff of claim underwriting and risk management professionals, SKIP specializes in providing personalized service, affordable premiums, and coverage which meets and often exceeds the state of Arizona's contract requirements for social service providers. For more information, visit our website at www.sscip.org or ask your insurance agent about protecting your organization with insurance coverage through SKIP.
Welcome back. I'm with 2 gentlemen from CIC Tucson, which is the Community Investment Corporation here in town. And it's a nonprofit, and both of them work there. And we're talking to Scott just before the break about how traditional school for people of an earlier generation is really different than it is today. There's so many options. And I think you're right. My husband and I laugh. He was on a school board for 8 years. So in Oracle, so a rural community. And one of the gals up there used to say, well, I used to go to school in a 1-room schoolhouse. Okay, well, it's really different from that today.
Yep.
And maybe there's a value to going back to that for some, but it was just kind of a funny thing. So your comment really kind of hit a chord for me when you said that.
Yeah. And I mean, options are wonderful and they're great, but they complicate it a little bit and they make it more difficult to understand what are those options. And ultimately we want to sort of simplify that and bring that information to parents. But just navigating, some people don't know that charter schools are actually public schools, so they certainly don't. If they don't know that, they don't know when they need to apply or when the enrollment deadlines are for those schools. So there's just a lot of information that's sort of shifted. And then the pandemic has also altered sort of the parent involvement and parents sort of understanding, hey, there might be a different form or method or place to educate my child. And so this is the system we live. And so I think it's only fair that they understand what that is and understand how to navigate that.
Scott also undersold. He was just like, oh, I'm a parent of a 5 and 7-year-old. Scott was a high school head of counseling at Sal Point for 12 years. Okay, and his wife was a teacher. So he's also, this idea of like hard for somebody who was new education to navigate the system for his young children.
Sure. And then it is so different everywhere, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, people move to Arizona and they, I get into conversation with them and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know how complicated it was. California was nothing like this. It was much simpler, So it's a great thing, but it's also can be difficult, especially for those who are new. And that's really one of the target audiences. It's a tool for everybody, all of Pima County, all parents, all families can use this tool and benefit, but really the target audience and those who need the most help, those who are new to the system, so either just moved in to the state or brand new to education, like going from preschool to kindergarten, those families have far less sort of working knowledge of the system. They need support as well. Immigrant families, brand new to the country, don't know sort of how to navigate that. So like I said, if it's hard for somebody who's an educator and cares and has two parents who are involved in that process, if it's hard for us, you can only imagine what it would be like for someone with less knowledge.
Sure. Do you also address the issues where you have different children? You're talking about special ed, I think, but where you have different children with different learning styles, or children on the autism spectrum, or there's so many different learning abilities and different styles. Do you address some of that in your references, where people can, if they say, I have a child who's struggling with this kind of learning style in my traditional school, can you help me find a place for that?
A little bit, yeah. We certainly believe that every child's unique and different, and each school is unique and different, and there may be a better fit for, even within a family structure, there might be a school that is more fit for one child and not the other because of those reasons that you've mentioned. So what we want to do is make sure that everybody understands what those terms are and understands what that process is, special education, for example. And then we also want to have our school locator be able to assist those families who are really looking for a school for their autistic child. They can put in keywords, they can filter, and they can do their search to really pull out the schools that they think might guide them to a school that would be the best fit. So, we aren't the experts in all of that, but really we just want to make sure that we do what we can to get that information to parents so that they can make the decision for themselves.
And we want to partner with other organizations. So there's often, this is the thing you I think you also know from nonprofit, you don't have to do everything yourself. There are amazing partners out there. So it may be guiding people to organizations that are more specialized. And again, for us to be a little bit of a clearinghouse, a little bit of a one-stop shop where people can go and find that information. And then we can also refer them to hopefully to other resources. Again, as Scott said, with people, if it's a child with autism, undoubtedly there's going to be an organization in town that is better equipped than we necessarily are, but to be able to make those types of referrals, I think that's important as well.
Sure. And that's the same with Impact. We recognize the value in all those partnerships across the community, and having one place to call to say, here's what I need, and then we're able to pass them along. So that's so important. But I think I was thinking about people who might want to utilize your tool. So of course on the podcast episode page, all of this information is listed and the website's listed. So is this where the listener will go to the website, to your website on the link, and to be able to access this information?
Yeah, so everything, myschoolstucson.org, they can access the school locator, all of the resources that we have up there for parents, and really get all their information there.
And if they want any information on the other programs, I wouldn't be a good executive director if I didn't plug that. They can also go to cictucson.org, and that's where there's information on homeownership lending, and you can also get to my schoolstucson.org from there.
Oh, good. I was wondering. So is it a standalone website then for My Schools Tucson,
yes,
but that it's also linked to the CIC website?
Yes.
Great. So you have two ways to find it, so that's a good thing. I was going to ask you something about, how do families currently engage with and gather information about schools? So without your resource, how are they making enrollment decisions? And obviously that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, so a very popular method is word of mouth. And that's, I think, what we all do. I think that's sort of human nature. We want to know what other people's experience was. And so that's a very common thing. And it certainly, I think, has some value and some merit. And I wouldn't say, oh, don't do that. But I think using that method alone is where we get into trouble, because each child is unique, each family is unique. And so listening to what one family's experience was about a school or with a teacher may not be what it means it will be like for their children. So word of mouth is popular and is certainly of value, but they travel to districts, they go to district websites, they go to school websites, but the problem is that it takes a lot of time, and there isn't a one-stop shop. So they use the internet, they use resources like that. And one of the driving force, as you mentioned, you have families that are commuting. One of the real driving forces as behind parents' decisions as to where to send their kids really comes back to logistics and transportation, getting to and from the school. Aftercare, daycare that Danny was mentioning becomes a key component, and cost of education. But really, location is one of the key factors for parents.
I would think, when you're talking about word of mouth, that would tend to keep people local too, I would think. Even when my kids were in elementary school, we were in a more rural community, so our schools were further apart. And so, like you're saying, convenience he was right there. And so when I asked my neighbor or the other people in the school what they were doing, they were only maybe, the next school over or two over. So it wasn't like we would really look at something that was maybe 20 minutes away or half an hour away.
Yeah.
And I think also, you also have, because of double working, two parents working, you also sometimes have, grandparents who are taking care of children. So where they live becomes a factor, as Scott said, like logistics. They may be the childcare, and that may not be at the neighborhood school per se. And at the same time, I want to shout out the neighborhood schools. So, places like Sunnyside, and as you guys are talking about, what do people consider? What's interesting is there are a wide number of factors, and we ask these types of things, and people really differ on what it is that they think is important. And sometimes you have groups that are saying like, oh, well, it's the school rating that matters the most. And the reality is that isn't what everybody's picking. That's not the reason they're picking schools. And what we also found, we talked to another group who had done some of this work out of Texas, because, you need to go ask people who have done this type of stuff. This group, Families Empowered, and they worked with a local school district and local schools. And what they found was at the beginning, they asked parents, like, what do you think of the school options there? And it was not... it wasn't a great response. They most people weren't like highly satisfied. It was something in the range of, between 10 and 20% thought there were good school options. They did nothing different than get information to the parents about existing programs and things and approaches that were happening in that school. And it was something like a 2 or 3 year period that they did that. And when they then asked the same survey at the end of the time, it had basically flip-flopped. And so you then had roughly 80% of parents, or a little bit over, who thought there were good school choices. And so part of this it really is about information and educating sometimes parents on what already exists and how powerful that can be. I occasionally joke that, people degrading the education system, it's become like sport. People just like those types of things, like how bad. And I'm a former teacher, so I have to say that, like, I gotta name my bias there. I'm a former teacher.
Well, that's fair, though.
Yeah, and I just think it's like, well, what can we do to get more information about how well schools are actually doing in ways that maybe people aren't thinking about? I mean, I hope people will agree, especially through the pandemic, it had to be the one of the, outside of first responders, hospitals, nurses, it had to be one of the most difficult jobs that anybody was doing at that time.
I felt that way. And my kids were out of school. I mean, they're all adults, but I was thinking, thank goodness I'm not going through the pandemic with kids at school.
And I thought, thank goodness I'm not a teacher anymore. I mean, that. And it's probably still the favorite job I ever had, but this is I think this is also part of that issue a little bit is how do we get people also to know about all that's going on and to respect schools and education, because it deserves our respect.
It does, and I think that positivity really, because there is so much good about school. But I don't know, do you agree, Scott, that whole idea of, okay, Arizona's ranked 49 or 48, or my husband would run around with, but we're 12th in this,
Yeah.
And it was just I don't know, we do take a hit here.
We want to highlight the good that's happening. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, the way you describe this is it like Yelp? And it's like Yelp in the sense that you can maybe find something, but it's not like Yelp in the sense of reviews. We're not going down the road of having parents write nasty reviews of schools. And I just know, being in education in Tucson for over 15 years, there are some wonderful programs and wonderful schools, and it's time to sort of magnify that and highlight that and let parents see the good that's happening, because there's a lot of it.
Well, I appreciate you being here today because, of course, for us being in June, I think now's the time if you're going to look into enrollment in a different place. But I don't know, is there still time? What time frame is there?
There is still time. I mean, ideally,
at the edge of the window?
Ideally, I think you want to start looking for schools about a year ahead of time, and maybe even more. But that is one of the things that we found in the survey. Parents are starting so late in the game, and primarily under-resourced parents, 4 times more likely to do no research before enrolling in a school. And they 2.5 times more likely to start later in the game. So that's what's happening, and it isn't too late. I mean, there is never it's never too late. And if you listen to this now and you decide, hey, I need to find a school, I want to find a school for the fall, or I want to switch schools, it's not too late to start. You may have some doors that have closed because of application deadlines and being full, but I think that's probably an exception. Most schools would have space at this point, but starting now is better than not. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. I would not have thought you'd be a year out, unless you were maybe in that transition where you're going from elementary to middle school and you want to find a different middle school, or you're in middle school and you're off to high school. And you're trying to think, well, is my local high school where I want to go? Is it going to offer me what I need? So
yeah, and I think that at first glance, people think, oh, there aren't many opportunities for parents to switch schools, and there are only those moments in time. But I think the pandemic has sort of changed that a little bit as of recent times, and the national studies have pointed to about 54% of parents in the last 12 months have considered a different school, either because they're moving from middle school to high school or preschool to kinder, or they're seeking a different type of education. So 54%, and that number even increases when you're talking minority population. So there is a need to provide information to parents about schools, and we hope to be doing that.
Well, we're glad you are doing it. You already have one booklet put together, it sounds like, so. And I see it on the table, so that's good news for people. How then does My Schools Tucson fit into the overall mission of CIC? CIC is doing these economic things, and of course we can make that general attachment, but how does the organization see My Schools Tucson as a part of CIC?
So certainly access to the economy, I believe, I know Danny believes that one of the fundamental instruments for sort of breaking cycles of poverty is a quality education. And I think you're more likely to find quality education if you engage and you explore and you really address the needs of your child and you look for schools that might be a good fit. So that's one main thing. The other piece that we haven't really talked much about, but really is probably the most important piece, and that's the family school engagement piece. And we know there's research out there that says that a healthy family school relationship is perhaps the biggest and strongest predictor to student success and positive student outcomes. So we believe that school exploration is really step one in that family school engagement relationship and that journey. And if we can get families comfortable, confident, and capable of asking questions and approaching administrators, I think it's a win for the parents, it's a win for the student, obviously, and it's a win for the school. They get families who are engaged in this process, and ultimately, that's going to lead to better student outcomes, which at some point will affect the economy and give them more opportunity to access the economy.
Sure. Even at Impact, we recognized that about 5 years ago or before the pandemic hit, in that just having glasses, something so basic, eyeglasses. We are partners with the Lions Club in our community. And so they used to come all the way down to Tucson in the morning to borrow the vision screening equipment from the Tucson Lions and then take it back out to Catalina and up into Pinal and all the northern Amphi schools. And we went with them, our program director and I, one day and did some screening of children. And it was amazing. We found a high school student whose glasses, he was 11th grade, and he needed 4 times correction, and he didn't even own glasses. And the principal said, "That guy, he's my worst discipline problem." Like, oh my gosh, that should have been recognized so long ago. So Impact went out and bought the vision screening equipment for our local Lions Club. And then we got one of our partner nonprofits to buy a second set of equipment. And then they just started, and now they screen thousands of children, the whole Copper Corridor, north end of Amphitheater, and I think they even cross over with Tucson Club when they don't have, they cover each other's time frames. But Impact buys the glasses so that the nurses then can get, when they send that letter home to the parent that says your child is being screened by the Lions Club and should see an eye doctor, and if you can't afford glasses, you can call Impact and they'll buy 2 pairs of glasses for your kids. And then we are doing literacy too. We, in our clothing bank, give out 2 books to every child every month. They can choose off the shelves. So this idea, we embrace that same concept that if you can make sure the kids are successful and they graduate from high school ready to tackle the world, it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, and that work you're doing is amazing because, as you said, it also allows children to have a better experience at school. And I think that is something that we don't maybe talk about enough because we look at scores and, those types of things, but people, I think, forget like the idea of if you have what Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but if you have what you need, it's a lot easier for you to be happy and satisfied with the experience that you're having at a school. And that goes on both sides, schools engaging with parents, how they feel about it, how parents feel about the schools that they're in if they're having positive experiences.
Sure. So I think it's going to be a win-win for parents and the students too. So this is pretty exciting to have this. Thank you for bringing it to Tucson.
Yeah.
I think maybe also, and besides this school information program, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes too, Danny, to hear about your other CIC program, that third program. Which is the mortgage credit.
Sure.
I think a lot of people have no idea that's in existence. And again, it's just there's so many things that people don't know about because you don't know what to ask, which is the beauty of this school program. Now you don't even have to know what to ask. You can just go to a website and learn all these things you didn't know you should be asking about. And I think the mortgage credit is pretty incredible.
So it's a great resource, mortgage credit certificate. Basically, it helps first-time home buyers. It helps them actually with the cost of owning a home. So that's one of the differences between renting and owning is that air conditioner breaks, you have to replace it, and you can't call anybody.
It's kind of like being an entrepreneur, isn't it?
It is.
Now you're responsible for everything.
That's right. And so it's basically a $2,000, up to $2,000, a dollar for dollar tax credit that comes off your at tax time. You basically get to reduce what you owe by $2,000, and even if you're getting a refund, it'll add that in there, and it's basically up to $2,000 off the. It's based on the interest you pay on your mortgage, and it's one of those things. I never say this, and so this is. I can't believe I'm doing it like on tape. But the idea is like, people talk about free money. Like this is actually free money. It is.
Sure.
It's everybody who qualifies for it. There is an income limitation, but it's actually higher than people think. Anybody who qualifies for it should take advantage of it. You get it every single year for however long you're in that house, even if you refinance the house. As long as you're still in the same house, you will get that benefit every single year. So it's great for those who are wanting to own a home. Most and I hope that people realize we're really about asset building. That was what you were asking. How does this fit into what you're doing? Well, education is an asset that nobody can take away from you. Home ownership is the way that most of the middle class, it's where most of the wealth of the country is in the middle class. If you're not in sort of the top 10% of earners, most of the wealth in the United States, for those below that, is held in a primary residence. It's one of the best ways to build wealth, build generational wealth. And the biggest problem is the cost of ownership, but it's also having a down payment. And so we also have down payment assistance programs, Pima Tucson Homebuyer Solutions. They are funded by the Tucson IDA and the Pima IDA, the IDA Industrial Development Authority. Everybody has really generic and long names, like Community Investment Corporation. Maybe we can, have a contest to rename us. But they fund those down payment assistance programs, and most renters, it's somewhere, it depends on the study you read, but 65 to 80% of renters say they would like to own a home, but they can't save the down payment. And so these are the down payment assistance programs that we run in conjunction. So that helps you get into the house. And then the MCC is something that helps you stay in the house because it helps with some of the costs that might, a little more money in your pocket to save for that rainy day when something breaks.
Well, especially when you first start your house payment, when you get that mortgage, I remember on our first house, which in all fairness was $125,000 in California back in the early 80s at the beach in Long Beach.
Do you still own that house?
No. Too bad, right?
That's why I was like, that is a shame.
I know. But you know what? In a short 10 years, it doubled, and we moved to Seattle and bought a house for a little less on 3/4 acre. And then 15 years later, we sold that house, which had really jumped in the market at that point. It was right before 2008. So we came down here and contracted a house. But the story I'm looking at is when you get your very first mortgage and you have to sign the future value of your loan, which for listeners who haven't had this opportunity yet is where it tells you what you will have paid by the time you've paid it all off over 30 years or whatever. Most people will start with a 30-year mortgage, especially if you're young and, like you say, you only have so much to put down. Well, it's shocking, and it's so much more than you're paying for your house. So that interest in the beginning too is all. I love the fact that if you can take $2,000 worth of interest off for your credit,
yep.
That in the beginning of your loan, that is not hard to do at all for a long time. Because you're paying something like $25 or $50 for your house, and the rest is all interest.
Right, and it is one of the things where, all the programs we have, we're not trying to force people into stuff, anything like that. And home ownership, it generally makes sense if you're going to be in the house 7 to 8 years, and it has to do with the amortization and all the stuff that will put everybody to sleep if we talk too much about
Sure.
it. But, it is that idea of if you know that you're going to be in a community and want to be in a community, it's somewhere, 5 to 7, 8 years, that's where the payback, it's worth it. And you're going to really start actually building wealth. And I think that's what we need to do more of. These are tools that people use to build generational wealth. And we need to make them accessible to more people. And so here's I'm like data and history a little bit. In the 1940s, there was no 30-year mortgage. They only had, it was 10-year mortgages. There might have been 15-year mortgages, and more money was required to be down. And somebody came up with a 30-year amortized mortgage, and the home ownership rate jumped by 50% over the next 2 decades. And what it was about providing access to capital in a different way, a whole group of people that never had access before. And by doing that, we had some of the greatest wealth building that we've ever seen in our country's history. And we need to find new ways to have people have access to these tools, these economic tools, sometimes boring to talk about them, but by creating that access for people, I think we're solving a lot of the problems that we see with generational poverty, the reverse. And we need to find more ways to help people. And it's really helping people help themselves. They're making the payments on the lending we do. People, in some ways, it's not charity.
Right.
We're just doing it differently than a bank will do it, but it's not charity. They are paying back, and that's all a lot of people need is just a little bit of help. Instead of somebody saying no, hearing yes, we like your idea and we're going to help you, or we trust you with a down payment and to buy this home.
Well, it's going to be great for people to know about, because I can tell you in our own clientele, people are now, after COVID, with rents being crazy, rents are almost as much as a house payment. So we have a lot of clients who say, if I could just get into a house, and that could be my house payment. So we're going to make sure people know about this. So thank you for coming in and talking about all these programs, and good luck, Scott, on the launch of the school program. We look forward to helping you get some of that information out. And I want to thank you both for being on the show, and really for all you do in the community to help everybody access these economic tools. Thank you so much.
Well, right back at you. Thank you for everything that you're doing as well. And thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you to the listeners for joining us as well. Good night.